Welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist community of Charlotte. I'm Jay Leach. I'm one of the ministers of this congregation, and my pronouns are he, him, his. So anxious am I to offer particular words on this day that I want to say them before anything else happens. Are you ready? Happy 2021. Did you hear me? 2021. It is a new year. Oh, we're not naive. Our liberating religion does not commend denial, does not invite us to delude ourselves with falsehoods. We know, of course, that so much of what made 2020 a miserable year crossed over Friday's threshold with us and will continue to make our lives miserable. But it is a new year, and perched on this first Sunday on its precipice, I invite us to breathe as deeply as we can and imagine all of the reasons we have to be hopeful. Intentionally, this first Sunday of the year directs our collective attention to our congregation's new byline, words straight from our mission statement: Cultivate Courageous Connections. Cultivate courageous connections. With the words we'll hear from many of us today, including the Stout family and those who appear in our video montage, and the music you'll hear today, including from a delightful couple who are both clarinetists, Kinsey Fournier and Daniel Martinic, and from my dear colleague John Herrick. We're being summoned anew in a new year, each of us and all of us, to cultivate courageous connections. So let's continue. Welcome again to today's service. Welcome to those of you who know this as your spiritual home. Welcome especially to our guests, to those of you who may have discovered us somehow in this virtual format. We'd love to have a real conversation with you. The best way to make that happen is for you to email our membership coordinator. Her name is Kelly Green, and you can find her at Kelly, Kelly, at UUCCharlotte.org. If you are watching this service on a Sunday morning, I promise you, you are not alone. To experience the connection that we share in these few moments, go now to our public Facebook page and post your personal greeting as a comment in response to the welcome message that you'll find there. At the heart of our community is a commitment to transformation, to real, substantive, meaningful, personal, collective, and societal change. We, as a community, recognize the brokenness and the barriers in old ways of thinking, speaking, naming, acting. That's why we together boldly proclaim ourselves to be among those who are building a new way. Again, welcome.
With full hearts, we affirm our relationships with one another. We recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous. We light this chalice, symbol of all that we are, all that we have done together, and all that we will bravely become.
Blessing the Boats by Lucille Clifton from Blessing the Boats, New and Selected Poems, 1988 to 2000. May the tide that is entering, even now, the lip of our understanding, carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain that it will love you back. May you open your eyes to water, water waving forever, and may you, in your innocence, sail through this to that.
From The Optimism of Uncertainty by Howard Zinn in The Impossible Will Take a Little While, A Citizen's Guide to Keeping Hope Alive in a Time of Fear by Paul Rogat-Loeb. Revolutionary change does not come as one cataclysmic moment, beware of such moments, but as an endless succession of surprises, moving zigzag toward a more decent society. We don't have to engage in grand, heroic actions to participate in the process of change. Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of the world in a different direction. And if we do act, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory.
We have a long cultural lineage that informs how we think about courage. It includes Greek mythological figures like Perseus, who decapitates the Gorgon Medusa, renders the Titan Atlas immobile, and then vanquishes the sea monster Cetus. There are artistic entries like that of the Jewish widow Judith, who beheads the Assyrian general Holofernes, in that feminist take on David and Goliath, depicted so often in Renaissance and Baroque paintings and sculptures. It has elements from many other places, settings, situations in which some ominous threat is vanquished, including, of course, our own national mythology with figures like the farmer soldier of the American Revolution, bushwhacking Daniel Boone, pistol-toting abolitionist Harriet Tubman, and larger-than-life cinematic roles from John Wayne to Wakanda. This compelling anthology functions subconsciously, predisposing us to assume that to have courage is to be a slayer of dragons and other ominously threatening monsters, or to face unflinchingly various sorts of enemies, and then to boldly go where no infinitives have been split before. All of that may be admirable, even inspiring. But if courage is a virtue demonstrated in such heroic acts, where does that leave us? If courage is what prompts bravery in the face of some life-threatening external danger, are the rest of us relegated to lives of meekness, cowardice even? Does courage have to be heroic? For 3 long Sunday afternoons last September, courage was the subject of virtual sessions I attended with poet David White. From his office on an island in the Puget Sound, White admitted that courage may indeed entail running against enemy fire. But that, he said, is just one form of courage. He called these conversations, from a line in one of his poems, half a shade braver. He invited us, participants from all over the world, to ask ourselves what it might mean to live lives that are half a shade braver. David White reminded us that the word courage comes from the French word coeur, meaning heart. Heart. A life of courage is a life with heart, a hearty life, a life we live by heart, grounded in the very core of our being. To have courage may not necessitate an encounter with any dragons or giants. To live a life of courage may not require us to wield any swords or face enemy fire. But as those more dramatic examples portray, such a purposeful life will ask of us intention, commitment, risk, change, and some kind of sacrifice. Our community's new byline, Cultivate Courageous Connections, invites each of us to imagine what it might mean to live a life of courage, a life at least half a shade braver. We intentionally don't define where or with whom such connections must be made. Could it mean connecting more courageously to our better selves, embodying some new calling, risking some new venture, letting go of something we've outgrown, or something that, purporting to keep us safe, also keeps us small? Could it mean connecting or reconnecting more courageously to some group, to this community, to some new cause? Might it mean making a more courageous connection with the people who are closest to you, finding the courage to forgive or to believe in anew? Perhaps your courageous connection may take you out into the larger community, where you'll use your voice, energy, and resources in new ways to help challenge oppression and injustice. Could cultivating some new courageous connection prompt some major change in your professional or personal life, or simply shift your attitude or your approach to your personal or professional life? What might it mean for you to cultivate courageous connections in this new year? If you were to resolve to follow the call of courage, where might life take you in 2021? I reached out to members of our community recently, inviting them to offer video responses to two prompts. One, what for you is courage? And the other, tell us about someone in your personal life who you found to have courage. What follows is their responses.
Having courage isn't comfortable. When I was a student teacher, I lost 15 pounds because I was so afraid. But my vision of being a teacher was stronger than my fear of failure. I oftentimes felt lost, but plunged into the unknown anyway. That's courage, daring to create an image that is so strong that no amount of fear can stop you. Now, the courage I showed was nothing compared to the courage that teachers are showing today. Teachers will have to muster even more courage to insist on change after the pandemic. There will be pressure to go back to the way it was. It'll take courage to create and implement a new version of school. But the most important endeavors require risk. May courage be stronger than fear for educators and for you in 2021.
My mother died 8 years ago at age 92, leaving a legacy of courageous acts. The sudden death of her father left her mother and 4 younger siblings in dire financial straits. Since she was the oldest, she felt the need to share the role of breadwinner with her mother. She insisted on putting her education on hold and dropped out of school. She found a job in a sewing factory miles away from their home. Her mother made sure she rented a room in a boarding house under the watchful eye of a landlord she felt would keep her safe. There she spent weeknights alone, missing her family and mourning the loss of her father. She spent days working at a sewing machine, all the while missing school. This brave young person, on the verge of following her own dreams for life, got up every day and did what she had to do to help provide for her brothers and sisters.
My name is Randy Whitt, and courage to me can be proactive or reactive. Courage could be the willingness to attempt something dangerous or fearful without knowing what that outcome might be, and also knowing that the outcome could be adverse. One person in my life was my mother-in-law, Willie Mae Cheryl Ballard, who grew up during the Depression and during World War II decided to join the Coast Guard and leave the mill town of Boger City, North Carolina. And after she returned after World War II, she got married, had 2 children, and then her husband left her. And then Willie was faced as a single mother in the early 1950s with taking care of everyone. She got a job with a phone company, worked there for over 30 years, managed as a single mother to purchase a home and pay off a mortgage. I think she just showed incredible courage in this face of adversity.
Courage is difficult. It requires us to let go of fear and act out of love and faith. Fear is a natural defense mechanism, but when left unchecked, it can seep into all of our actions. When this happens, we become unable to trust ourselves. We must recognize that the only thing we can control is ourselves. The potential for courage is within all of us, but requires practice to be realized. Sometimes courage will fail, but over time it becomes easier and easier. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, "For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline."
Good morning. I'm Bob Gorman. I have a friend, Louise, who at the age of 23 in 1949 took over the management of her family's cotton ginning business near Lancaster, South Carolina. Late one night during ginning season, Louise gave one of her African-American employees a ride home. As they traveled along the back roads, they suddenly came across a group of Klansmen in full regalia. As you can well imagine, that was a very dangerous situation. Although Louise may have been frightened, she refused to allow the Klansman to drag her passenger from the car. Instead, she told them that he was her friend and her employee. And then she added she fully expected him to be back at work the following day before driving away from the astonished Klansman. Louise is someone who believes in the worth and dignity of all people, who thinks that we all have a responsibility for each other. And that gave her the courage to do what she did. May we all have the courage to live by what we believe.
Everyone has probably heard variations of that quote, courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. And it's a useful quote, and I've used and misused it many times in my life. But every time I hear it, I think about my mother. And she was raised in 1950s America in the Catholic tradition and taught to fear pretty much everything. But she did it anyways. She left home. She enrolled in graduate school. She left her husband. She became a single working mother in 1974. And she raised me to understand that the fear is there and to embrace it and to push through it, because on the other side is the person you're supposed to be. And I can't imagine having been raised by anybody else, and I can't imagine how I would be and how I would raise my own children if I hadn't had the example of her just being scared and doing it anyways.
Sometimes you find courage where you're not expecting it. I'm Barry Arendt, and in the late 1980s, I met a man who taught me a life lesson about courage. Paul Cronin had AIDS, a disease that at the time made a lot of people afraid of him. But Paul was not at all menacing, and an unlikely hero. He would not beat AIDS, but his fight against the stigma of AIDS won him a place in the history of the epidemic in Massachusetts. He was shunned, harassed, and threatened at work, and he fought back, challenging his employer in court and winning recognition that people with AIDS belong in the workplace. As a journalist, I followed Paul's story for more than a year and a half, as doctors did what they could, and courts and corporations came to grips with this new disease. In the process, Paul overcame fear and shame. He looked death in the face and refused to quit. Paul's acts of personal bravery and determination to right a wrong helped define courage for me. I wish you could have known him.
I've been thinking about those junctures in my life that have required the most courage. Moves, career changes, relational commitments, choices to take certain actions, invest in particular movements, confronting or challenging someone or something that wasn't right. At each such juncture, I've had to assess my options, make a decision, breathe deeply, and then act. While those choices and actions and consequences all ultimately fell to me, I now realize I was never acting in isolation. I've been fortunate. When I've most needed the courage to act, there have always been those I love and respect to whom I could turn for encouragement. You hear the obvious connection? Experiencing encouragement, being heartened as it were, enables us to act with courage, to live a life truer to that deepest, truest impulse in our heart. Courage may seem like a solitary individual virtue, but it is sustained by encouragement, by a courageous connection to another, to some others. My paternal grandfather was the only member of his family on that large farm outside a tiny town to leave home in pursuit of a college degree. Decades after graduating, he'd still recount with such appreciation a certain French professor. It seems there was a class in which Papa's soft Southern palate struggled to properly pronounce some especially challenging text. With abiding gratitude, he'd recount how that professor walked across the room, put his hand on my grandfather's shoulder, and said aloud, "You can do it, Mr. Fox. You can do it." Encouragement, to give heart, to hearten. We continue to explore barriers to belonging within and beyond our community. It is in that context that we now invite all of us to cultivate courageous connections. What might it mean to encourage one another, to call forth courage from one another? Change is not easy. We all know that. Seeing things in new ways, naming things in new ways, approaching things in new ways, learning to speak and act and think in new ways. These are not easy. We know that. But we are, after all, those committed to, remember, to personal, collective, communal, societal transformation. What might it mean for each of us to encourage the cultivation of courageous connections in this new year? If we were to resolve collectively to follow the call of courage, where might life take us in 2021? The life of this congregation extends beyond our Sunday morning services. We invite you today, as every Sunday, to join us in our virtual coffee hour to follow this service. You can look to our public Facebook page, a message posted there earlier this morning that gives you the whole day's schedule and a way to access that live gathering by way of Zoom, again, to follow our service today. You can look to our electronic newsletter, Currents, for insight into the larger life of our congregation. You can find it on our website. You can also sign up there to receive it each week in your email inbox on Thursday afternoon. I particularly commend to you a very special offering that is coming up. It will be presented by 3 trained members of our congregation on transgender inclusion. As we continue to explore this year's theme of the way barriers and boundaries are limitations on belonging, not only in the larger community, but within our own community as well, I hope there will be robust participation in this upcoming offering. Again, look to Currents for a way that you can sign up to reserve one of the slots for this very special course that's coming up soon. We continue to hold with love and in our prayers the members of our congregation whose needs are known to us. If you have some special need for yourself or for a member of your family, I hope you will reach out to one of us who are the ministers of this congregation. We would love to be in conversation with you and to offer our support to you. We thank you for the generous contributions that continue to make possible what we do. Thank you to our members who have not only made generous pledges, but who pay regularly on those generous pledges. We rely on your support to enable us to continue to offer what we do. I remind you that we now have multiple electronic portals that enable you to give a special contribution, just as you would have done in the passing of the baskets were we offering an in-person service at this time. At the end of this service, you will see posted the various electronic portals that enable you to make those contributions. I do hope you will avail yourself of those, as we do rely so deeply on your generosity to sustain our congregation. And thank you to each of you who continue to contribute generously. I love those words from Howard Zinn that Chandra Stout read for us earlier, in which Zinn acclaims, "To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives." I not only love those words, I need them now. Enough to offer them again. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. We're choosing this year to emphasize a particular call. Oh, we'll still talk about and teach about the cruelties. We won't engage in some foolhardy denial that these are unquestionably bad times in so many ways. But the call of courage invites us not to define our lives, our attitudes, our approaches by the worst things that people do, or by what we don't like, don't have, don't agree with. We're being invited to connect deeply with our capacities for courage and to commit deeply to a practice of encouragement, the encouragement to take risks, to make changes, to try new ways, to commit to new habits, practices, involvements, and investments. To connect and commit so that, as Howard Zinn puts it, those choices will determine our lives. I've been thinking a lot about courage since sitting with David White last September, about the call to courage in my life and in ours now. So I'm resolving to keep focusing in these times on courage and to listen to its beckoning call, to live a hardy life, one true to my heart, to follow the call of courage even when it feels risky. For you, for each of you, an echo of Lucille Clifton's words, the ones Galen Stout offered us earlier. May the tide that is entering even now, the lip of our understanding, carry you out beyond the face of fear. From my colleague and friend, Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. To send us out today, we offer an extended excerpt from a song by a contemporary gospel artist, Hezekiah Walker, that our choir sang in a service a couple of years ago. I invite you to sit with these words, with this experience, to be encouraged by them. And I ask you during this time to use our electronic portals to make a generous contribution so that we can continue our work together. From Hezekiah Walker, I need you. You need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me. Agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It's God's will that every need should be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive.